I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, on to the Senate. A bipartisan group of House lawmakers approves the debt ceiling proposal. We're on Capitol Hill. Revolution failed. What a Catholic priest is saying about communism in Cuba. Foul ball. The Wall Street Journal weighs in on the situation with the faithful and a Major League Baseball team. And learning the universe. Why students from all over the world are packing their bags for the Vatican this summer. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Justin Martyr. Our top story tonight, a victory for House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The bipartisan debt ceiling deal now heads to the Senate after clearing the U.S. House by a wide margin with a sizable Democratic support. Let's get right to it and check in with Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales, who has the latest. Eric?
Well, good evening, Tracy. You know, the vote was 314 to 117, despite a number of conservative Republicans actually voting against the deal. More Democrats than expected actually voted for it. Meanwhile, some members of the House Freedom Caucus are already talking about plans to replace Speaker McCarthy. Meanwhile, the Speaker of the House, he was all smiles immediately after the vote.
We decided that you had to spend less, and we achieved that goal. Is it everything I wanted? No. I think we did pretty dang good for the American public.
A feeling echoed by Senate Republican leadership and many Democrats.
On balance, I think they struck a pretty good deal. It's got permitting reforms, which is something we wanted, some work requirements. It's got clawback of funding from the IRS and from COVID. And, so there's just a lot of stuff in here, and $1.5 trillion in reduced spending.
We could not allow that there be a default. We protected Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and veterans benefits. That was our goal. We succeeded in that. I plan to vote yes.
But several Senate Republicans tell me they're voting no without amendments.
I'd love to get a vote on a package, on a bill, or on an amendment, rather, that would actually reduce our trade deficit with China. I mean, take it to zero and bring those jobs back to the United States. I mean, if we could get that in the package, I'd vote for it.
This bill does nothing to reduce inflation. Nothing. Matter of fact, it takes the debt ceiling from $31 to probably at least $35 trillion. That's not going to reduce inflation.
My concerns are having to do with defense spending and the pressure we see from great power competition, the 87,000 IRS agents that are still in there. You don't see the push against the border.
Meanwhile, Speaker McCarthy's leadership days may be numbered if some Freedom Caucus members like Congressman Ken Buck gets his way.
I think what the discussion about the motion to vacate is going to happen in the next week or two.
That's right. He said the next week or two, so we're going to have to be following that story very closely. Meanwhile, Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, he said on the floor today that the Senate will remain in session until the bill is passed and sent to the president's desk. That means working around the clock, possibly throughout the weekend. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Joe Biden released a statement after last night's vote saying neither side got everything it wanted, but he called the agreement good news for the American people and urged the Senate to pass the bill so that he can put his signature on it. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, President Joe Biden was in Colorado Springs, Colorado today, giving the commencement speech at the Air Force Academy. That's where he watched the House votes come in as well. And he also mentioned in that statement you referred to, the only path forward is a bipartisan compromise that can earn the support of both parties.
Graduates, you've made a noble choice to lead a life of service.
At the U.S. Air Force Academy, President Joe Biden also tells cadets in the graduating class of 2023,
this day is the day to celebrate. And as your Commander-in-Chief, I'm honored to be here as you take on the duties of serving and defending our nation.
And as they embark on their new journey, the list of threats facing America long and growing.
We're seeing proliferating global challenges, from Russia's aggression and brutality in Europe to our competition with China and a whole hell of a lot in between.
Meanwhile, Sudan, fighting between warring sides, a shaky ceasefire, hundreds killed. At least 60 children perished over the past 6 weeks while trapped in harrowing conditions in an orphanage in Sudan's capital as fighting raged outside. The White House announces sanctions targeting those who are perpetuating the violence. Also overseas, the King and Queen of Jordan welcome First Lady Jill Biden to their son's royal wedding. Crown Prince Hussein married Wajwa Al Saif, who was born in Saudi Arabia and attended college in the U.S. And in the race for the White House, former Vice President Mike Pence is reportedly going to make his announcement next week, while former President Donald Trump appeals to faith leaders on the campaign trail in Iowa, and earlier, a group of conservatives.
Make America great again. That's a very simple statement, but we'll do it fast, too. We don't need 8 years. We need 5 months.
Now, back to the president's speech in Colorado today. After he handed out diplomas to graduates, he tripped and fell on stage. An Air Force officer, as well as 2 Secret Service members, helped the president to his feet. And tonight, the White House communications director tweeted that the president is fine. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, a recent opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal sharply criticizes the Los Angeles Dodgers for its decision to honor a transgender group that openly mocks the Catholic faith. Matthew Hennessey says, in part, quote, "Everyone is already welcome at the ballpark. It feels un-American to force-feed culture war politics alongside the Peanuts and Cracker Jack." And the author of that piece joins us now. Matthew Hennessey is an opinion columnist at the Wall Street Journal. Matthew, great to have you on today. We appreciate it. A lot to discuss, but first, I'm curious why you felt the need to write the story and what has been the response so far.
Well, I wrote the story because I was outraged, not because I'm a Dodgers fan, although I am a baseball fan. What they elected to do in the first place by inviting that group to their annual Pride Night, I thought was ill-considered, and they rightly rescinded the invitation after Catholics in Los Angeles, California, and the rest of the country objected. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles issued a very strong statement at that time. And then when they elected to rescind the rescindment and re-extend the invitation to the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, it seemed to me like a naked capitulation to a group that is very clearly and unabashedly intent, their purpose is to mock Catholic faith. They're not shy about it. They express that openly. So I was offended as a Catholic, and I thought that there were probably many like me, and so that's why I wrote that piece. Turns out there are many like me. The leaders of the Catholic diocese in California have led on this, but other bishops have been very vocal, calling for a boycott of the Dodgers. And so, in the last week or so, we've seen the hardening of some positions, but we've seen a couple of interesting developments in that, a Dodgers pitcher, a very prominent player, Clayton Kershaw, came out and said he was not pleased with his organization's decision. At least one other pitcher on the Dodgers has come out and said in no uncertain terms that he doesn't support their decision to honor this group. And so we'll see in the next, it's 2 weeks until this actual event takes place on June 16th. And we'll see if there's more players who develop a case of courage in that time.
Yeah. And what do you think about their reaction? And also, the reaction so far from the faithful and church leaders over all this?
Well, we've gotten a lot of letters at the newspaper, siding with us or siding with me, condemning the Dodgers for doing this. It seems like these organizations are under so much pressure from LGBT groups and woke activists to do this kind of virtue signaling. A common sense approach to this is to say, look, it's a ball game. These are baseball teams. These are sports teams. Can they not just play sports? Can we not just come to the ballpark and forget about the culture wars for a few hours, or watch the game on TV with our kids without having to have this stuff thrown in our face? And the answer to that from them is, well, listen, gay people can be baseball fans too. To which I say, nobody said any different. As I said in the piece, the game is available to everyone. Anyone can come buy a ticket and watch the game. You don't have to be straight, gay, or anything. And it's not part of that's not written on the ticket that the game is only for certain people. So the beauty of baseball is it's democratic aspects. Anyone with a bat and a ball can play. Anyone with 3 or 4 hours that they want to kill can go to the game. It's unfortunate that the sports that we all love have become so suffused with all of these political questions.
Yeah, we're almost out of time, maybe about a minute or so left, Matthew, but I'm curious, how do you see this all playing out, with the Dodgers?
Well, if I had to guess, I would guess that the game goes on as scheduled and the event goes on as scheduled, and then everybody forgets about it for a year. Unfortunately, that's the way these things always go. As many have pointed out, if they were mocking any other group, there would likely be serious repercussions economically. People would stop buying tickets, would stop going to the game. But since it's Christians, since it's Catholics, you'll get a general sense that it's okay, that this is, as my colleague Jerry Baker said, this is like one of the last acceptable prejudices.
Yeah, we're going to leave it right there. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including ongoing persecution, why the church in Nicaragua is facing accusations from the Ortega regime. And was it worth it? What a priest is saying about the Cuban Revolution over 60 years later. Earlier, a growing number of Major League Baseball players are speaking out against the Los Angeles Dodgers over the team's decision to honor a transgender group that mocks Catholics. But what exactly can the players say and do in protest if they have a contract with the team? And are their conscious rights protected? Joining us now to talk about this and more is Andrea Picciotti-Bayer, EWTN News legal analyst and director of the Conscious Project. Andrea, great to be with you as always. A lot to get to, but first, let's talk about the Dodgers and the players speaking out against the team's invitation to this transgender group, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. If a player is under contract, which I would venture to say probably all of them are, could they face legal repercussions if they voice their opinion or protest in any way, such as sitting out a game?
Tracy, first, thank you so much for having me on. And that's a great question. As far as the nature of each individual player's contract, looking at them, looking at the terms, what they're allowed to do, what sponsorships they have, what they say against the program is going to be on a case-by-case basis. But I do think it's very important that we see and applaud these courageous athletes for standing up, not only for their own beliefs, but for the dignity of the game. This is America's favorite pastime, and the drag queens are not only offensive to Catholics, but it's not an appropriate kind of a group to hold out in what should be a family-friendly environment.
Yeah, and Andrea also talked to us about conscious rights, and can that play into all of this, even if a player or someone else has a work contract?
Normally when we think about religious freedom or conscience rights, we think about the government and what restrictions are on the government. Typically, when we're dealing with employers and employees, there can be issues of wrongful termination for voicing one's beliefs. We did see when players in Major League Baseball or in football were standing up for concerns that they had about racial discrimination, and there wasn't any repercussions for doing that. But I do think that there's a more powerful weapon in addition to speaking one's voice if you have a perch, and that's for the American people as consumers or as people visiting and watching sport being played to say, we do not want to be a part of this, and walking away. I also wanted just to share, in thinking of today is the anniversary of the Sisters of Life. I would love for New York, either the Yankees or the Mets, to invite the sisters in celebration of their anniversary and their contributions so that we really do have a proper understanding of what religious orders offer to our society and that they can be held up in high regard instead of being mocked.
Absolutely. I want to pivot now to the Supreme Court, which is winding down before summer recess. What are some of the decisions that you're waiting for there?
We've spoken before, Tracy, about this. One of the most important is 303 Creative, and that's involving a wedding website designer out of Colorado, Lori Smith, who does not want to create anything other than wedding websites for traditional marriages between a man and a woman, and that's grounded in her Christian belief on traditional marriage. She's asking the Supreme Court to rule that the First Amendment protects her right to be able to use her expressive talents consistent with her beliefs. It's a really important case because it shows the intersection between free expression and faith. And that's something that's coming up again and again in our court systems, especially as anti-discrimination laws are being stretched beyond to include things like sexual orientation and gender identity. And for many people of faith, especially for Christians and Catholics, we have to live our lives coherently in not only what we believe, but in how we live.
Andrea, do you have any sense maybe how the court will rule in this case?
You know, I never want to get predictions, but having listened to oral argument, it does seem that the justices are concerned about the government forcing Ms. Smith to use her talents against her beliefs. It's consistent with a long tradition that we have against government-compelled speech. So I think that Ms. Smith will be the victor, and it's very important that state and federal governments take note of this and don't force Americans to act or speak against their beliefs.
Andrea, so great to have you on and get your insights as always. Really appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you, Tracy.
The Supreme Court of Oklahoma has struck down 2 state laws banning abortion. However, abortion remains illegal in most cases. The justices say the 2 measures are unconstitutional because of the language used. The state's Republican governor says the ruling is another example of the court becoming, quote, over-involved in the democratic process. The Diocese of Fort Worth says the Vatican has given its leader, Bishop Michael Olson, authority over a group of nuns. This amid an investigation by the diocese into whether the Mother Superior of that order had an affair with a priest. The Mother Superior has since filed a lawsuit against Bishop Olson and the diocese. The bishop accuses the religious sisters of, quote, hatred and animosity towards him. Well, the Holy Father has accepted the resignation of a bishop from India cleared of a rape charge in a civil trial. Bishop Franco Malaco was cleared of rape charges in 2022. His resignation comes more than 16 months after his acquittal by a court in India. The Vatican did not immediately provide a reason for the resignation nor why the Holy Father accepted it. A Catholic priest in Cuba is speaking out against the country's communist government. Father Alberto Reyes said in a social media post that 64 years is more than enough time to realize the revolution of 1959 has failed. He has also asked those who run the country to, quote, wake up and realize the citizens are suffering. The dictator leader of Nicaragua has launched a fresh attack against the Catholic Church. President Daniel Ortega now accuses the church of crimes, including money laundering, and has used the claims to freeze the bank accounts of many of the Central American countries' parishes. According to a statement, government officials say they found hundreds of thousands of dollars hidden inside of church facilities. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, sky's the limit. Why a couple of dozen lucky students are spending the summer at the Vatican. Plus, why the month of June is particularly special to Catholics. Following a several years-long break because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Vatican Observatory Summer School is welcoming students back this week. 24 college and graduate school-level students were selected. They hail from 20 countries around the world. The school meets for 1 month every 2 years. The last session was canceled because of the pandemic. The program began back in 1986. Tuition is free, and travel and housing are also funded by donations from the Vatican Observatory Foundation. We go now to Chris Graney, astronomer and historian with the Vatican Observatory. Chris, great to see you as always. Can you tell us more about the summer school and also how it will look post-pandemic?
Well, the post-pandemic, what we're most excited about is that it will look at all. In other words, it will exist. The summer school ran every 2 years from 1986 up to 2018. And this is the first one since 2018, and it's going to be back to normal. They've got a really interesting list of activities, lots of science, but also fun stuff. They're going to go to the beach. They're going to have a an audience with Pope Francis, if all goes according to schedule. And they're going up to Florence to see the Galileo's house that he lived in and the Galileo Museum. And, you know, they stay in a cool hotel that's just, if you could set a golf tee up on the roof and hit a golf ball over into the Papal Gardens from it. So, you know, post-pandemic, it's back to the good way it was, I think.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Where do these students come from? And can you tell us the selection process?
So there was roughly 200 applicants, and they are looked at, you know, this is a group of aspiring professional astronomers. You know, they are in college and graduate school to be an astronomer, and they look at them based on, you know, their interest in astronomy and their academic merit, and then only 2 people from each country are chosen, and so that just, you know, pulls out a group that's very international. There's a large group from Latin America, a fairly large group from Europe, and then others are scattered here and there from Asia and North America. It's quite a nice group.
Yeah, and sounds like an incredible experience for all of them. I want to switch gears here slightly. We reported yesterday that it is the start of the Atlantic hurricane season, and the Vatican Observatory, I know, has just released some research in regards to that topic. What more can you tell us about that, Chris?
Yeah, I can tell you a lot because I was part of that research. It's historical research. Brother Guy Consimano, who's the director of the observatory, and I just published a paper. It came out this week on the history of Jesuit scientists and what's called the Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect is this turning motion of anything that moves on the surface of the Earth, and it is the origin of the rotation in weather patterns, including the rotation of a hurricane. And these Jesuit astronomers, they were investigating back at the time of Galileo in the 17th century whether or not the Earth rotated. They were, you know, that was a big topic, and they thought, no, it doesn't, because they envisioned if Earth rotated, there should be this effect, which we now call the Coriolis effect. They could not detect that effect, and they were envisioning it happening in cannonballs being fired. You know, that if you shot a cannon and the Earth rotated, because the ground moves slower up by the poles than it does down by the equator, this should cause a deflection of the flight of a cannonball. And they're like, well, we don't see this happening, so the Earth's not rotating. And that was part of the general debate on the motion of the Earth. There's a Jesuit, Father Giovanni Battista Riccioli, who wrote a very large book, and on the frontispiece he has this image of mythological figures weighing the different models of the universe in a scale to see like which one is better, and the Copernican system versus a system developed by a guy named Tycho Brahe. And Tycho wins in their weighing, in part because of this Coriolis effect that they envisioned. They were right, but they were wrong in that it actually does occur. So we're very excited about this research that just came out right in time for the Atlantic hurricane season.
Well, Chris, always great speaking with you. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. God bless.
All right. Thanks for your interest in the observatory.
Well, finally tonight, a reminder that the month of June holds a special meaning for Catholics. June is devoted to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The feast dates back to the 17th century when Jesus appeared to a religious sister in eastern France. While he explained that love he has for all humanity, his heart appeared on the outside of his chest. Christ also pledged to give us consolation for our troubles and to be a refuge in life and death. This year, the Feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus is June 16th. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.